G'day, I've just attended a private advanced screening of F1, the movie in Montreal, and it's impressive. But I'm an F1 accredited photographer, and I was at the track for every day they filmed over race weekend, so I was probably a bit more invested in the movie than others. Now just quickly, could the 50% of you not yet subscribe to the channel please hit the subscribe button now. The F1 movie plot? Brad Pitt, an aging F1 racer who raced against the likes of Senna and Prost in his younger days, returns to the sport to save a struggling team, Apex. Any romance? A bit, but a lot less than I expected. This man is convincing as Sonny Hayes, Javier Bardem is the team owner, Kerry Condon shines as Brad's race engineer, and Damson Idris is Brad's younger teammate. Now straight up, there are two sides to this movie. The storyline that plays out off track and the stunning on track action, which is where this movie shines. I think it'll leave you breathless. It's produced by Top Gun producer Jerry Bruckheimer. The production team were provided with unprecedented access to the sport and its main players. Filmed at tracks over a 2-year period, it blends real F1 racing action with a Hollywood storyline. Is it the greatest F1 movie? You'll be the judge of that. But more importantly, will it keep you entertained for 2.5 hours? Yes, that's right. This movie runs 2.5 hours. It kept me on my seat, but I'm a lot closer to this movie given the fact that I'm nearly in scenes like this one here, shot at Silverstone in 2023. And going back to this shot, most of us were clueless that Brad and Damson would be walking back to their Apex cars, which were at the rear of the grid. I fluked being in the right spot to grab these shots. Now, they had security and they had production people looking out in case others walked into the shot or ruined it somehow, as they really only had one chance to get it. It's not like doing a retake is a possibility. Now, if you're wondering whether Brad and Damson actually drove these cars, the answer is yes, and they were pretty handy drivers. Brad, apparently a natural. These are the fictional Apex F1 cars. They were allowed to run on track during racing weekends, albeit in between other track sessions with fans in the stands. So the official premiere was held last night in New York with these drivers in attendance. They were given a preview of the movie back in May in Monaco, and this is what they had to say. It entertained me, made me laugh. I suffered a bit with the crashes I saw. Incredible, biggest film of the year. The best racing movie ever. I loved it. Hollywood-like. You feel like you're a driver watching the movie. If you're a true Formula One fan, you've got to laugh a few times. It's great. I wish I could have seen it when I was a kid. It's incredible. They did an amazing job. I was fortunate to be one of a couple of hundred people invited to a private IMAX screening of the movie, attended by both Jerry Bruckheimer and director Joseph Kosinski. Some very impressive technology was used to film the on-track sequences. They then blended the footage from those sessions with actual footage from races. F1 were hell-bent on this production being a success, so they provided the production team with super high-quality vision of races, both from fixed cameras and those on board the 20 real F1 cars in each race. And when you see vision of Sonny or Joshua dicing with, say, Max Verstappen on track, you'll notice the Apex cars look slightly different to the F2 modified cars that they drove on track. That's because some very talented CGI artists managed to reskin, say, a Williams car to look exactly like an Apex car, with all of the Apex logos and colour scheme. And when I watched the movie, I couldn't find one instance of it not being thoroughly convincing. And on the subject of sponsors, the movie production company went out to a lot of F1 sponsors saying, would you like to be on the Apex car and the driver's gear, just like a real team? They had a hospitality suite set up in Silverstone, just like a real team, although it was much smaller, and they had garages at various tracks with the same signage as other teams. And despite them being a struggling team, which would mean they're probably down the end of the pits, at some tracks like Silverstone, they were right in the middle of pit lane between major teams. So is this movie aimed at real fans or new fans? I think it will strike a chord with both, although true diehard fans are probably going to be critical of a number of things. Like what? Well, to race in Formula One, a driver needs to gain a super license. Brad would not have qualified for one under the current regulations. But someone new to the sport is not going to have any idea of that, nor would they care. At one point, there's a need to change a driver just before a race start. However, purists will know that a driver who hasn't set a time in qualifying cannot start in the race, not even from pit lane. Have a look at this scene that I shot in 2024 at Hungary. Two drivers high-fiving their crew in Parc Fermé after a good result. Not a top 3 result, just a good result. However, purists will be noting That's not possible. Crews can't go to Parc Fermé if their driver doesn't finish 1 to 3. Again, that's not really important. Press conferences that wind up with journos shouting questions as the drivers walk out, that never happens either. They're very staid affairs at Formula One. Another thing in the movie, after a long race, the drivers always come out of the car in pristine white race suits, whereas in real F1 life, have a look at the back of a race suit. Dirty marks from the seat. If you go to the final scene, long-time fans will pick up that the trophies are handed out in the wrong order. And one final thing, towards the end of the movie, a driver walks through a very crowded corridor with lots and lots of patrons from the paddock in there. However, he's not accosted for a selfie or an autograph once. No one even pays him any attention. I can tell you straight up, that is never going to happen at a Formula One race. And if this movie turns out to be the blockbuster that it looks like it might be, it will be even harder for drivers to get around the paddock than it is now. What is the target market for this movie? The US.
We have a focus group where they take 20 people and ask them questions about the movie. The first question was, how many of you have seen a race and know something about F1? One hand went up out of 20. This is in America, okay? After they saw the movie, what do you feel? Are you interested in seeing an F1 race, knowing about F1? Every hand went up.
F1 is certainly the most colourful and glamorous form of motor racing. It is the very top tier, and this movie could easily reach 100, maybe even 200 million plus people, with many being introduced to the sport via the movie. I spoke to a number of journalists after the preview who thought that the whole thing was a bit too over the top, too Hollywood. Well, it is a dramatisation of the sport. And if a moviegoer sees this movie and then watches or attends their first race, they will probably be disappointed that cars aren't overtaking each other at the same rate as the movie portrays. They might also be surprised about qualifying. It was rarely mentioned, and certainly there was no on-track action from a qualifying session. And go a step further, I think they'll be gobsmacked to find out that F1 runs over 4 days, not just a race day. Let's now go to the current Formula One drivers. Do they appear? Well, some do. We see a few of them on the grid prior to races. Yes, the real grid, the likes of Lando, Max, Lewis, who also gets a major credit on screen given his involvement in the movie. And when the credits run at the end of the movie, have a look on the right-hand side because you'll see the names of all of the F1 drivers who raced in the 23 and 24 season, along with one dog. Do you know which dog? When you see the movie, you'll know. Did I laugh? Yes, I reckon about 5 times. And one of those times involved this man, Gunther Steiner. I spoke to him about that scene and he said they wanted at least 10 takes. And he said, nope, you're getting 5. And he gave them 5. Spine-tingling moments? Yeah, I think there are a few of them. The first one is in Silverstone, the first time we see an F1 car on screen. That was on a test day, and they rented Silverstone for a number of days to complete their movie. The other climax that comes to mind is the end scene, the final race in Abu Dhabi. The race action is electric. And I imagine those of you who have home theatres will be putting that scene on to showcase how swish your home theatre sound system is when you get a chance to get that on DVD, I gather. I used to play my Top Gun soundtrack on my home theatre in the 80s because that was the go-to movie soundtrack at that time. These gentlemen, Martin Brundle and David Croft, play important roles. They provide the race commentary, much of which is used to educate those new to the sport about some of the intricacies of Formula One. I learnt too that the movie script was subject to change, and change it did. At one stage they decided they needed to explain a certain situation that hadn't been explained, and they thought the best way to do it was with a press conference. So one was written. Tom Clarkson, the current host of the FIA press conferences at the track, was asked to be involved, and with him would be team principals from 3 teams. Apex, obviously, Ferrari and McLaren, although instead of the team principal, they had Zach Brown, who is the CEO. That was filmed in Las Vegas at the time of the 2024 race. Other F1 personalities to feature in the movie. Well, Will Buxton pops up a few times. He's now gone to IndyCar. And Natalie Pinkham and Rachel Brooks ask questions in the press conferences. And one delightful surprise for me was hearing the voice of arguably F1's finest commentator over a scene from the past. Is there any product placement? Yes, this is a commercial venture. And as such, there are things that pop up, and probably the most obvious one is a plug for Paddock Club. You won't miss that, I promise you. And one thing I think that most F1 fans will look at and think, that's never going to happen, is a pit stop scene. I won't go into too much detail, but when you watch it, I'd love to hear your comments below as to whether or not you thought that was even a possibility at an F1 race. Over 2.5 hours, there were a number of highlights for me, and one that came to mind was seeing Fernando Alonso on the podium in Zandvoort on the big IMAX screen. It was a standout. Yes, I've mentioned the Abu Dhabi race, but I'll say it again. You will love that. And the other thing that I loved was Toto Wolff's little cameo towards the end of the movie. Disappointments? A couple. One being the fact that on a previous trailer for the movie, they used the Fleetwood Mac song The Chain, and that's a song that's been used, I think, by Live at 5 in BBC for their race broadcasts. And I love that song, and I think it's just perfect. But it's not included in the movie. But the soundtrack, on the other hand, was excellent, and I would have been lucky to know 20% of those songs on the album. This is one of the most expensive movies ever made, some $300 million US. And I hope they turn a profit. And if they do, I will warn you, demand for tickets will go sky high, and I know that's going to upset a lot of fans because the result of that will be higher ticket prices. But F1, which is really Liberty Media, is focused on growing the sport, which had stagnated under the ownership of Bernie Ecclestone in those final years. New fans will be clamouring for team merchandise, and even the likes of my bucket hats, which are already hugely popular and available at the shop at kimellman.com, where you'll also find hand-signed and numbered prints by a range of F1 drivers. I give this movie a big thumbs up. It's an entertaining and colourful 2.5 hours of entertainment, and it's focused on my workplace. Before you go and buy your tickets, could you please subscribe if you haven't already done so, or at the very least like this video. And for a whole lot of extra content and merchandise and stuff, these are the sites you need to look at. Thanks for watching.
And stay passionate.
Take this off again.